These kids were drinking beer in a hot tub over a dead body and not even knowing it. Hey there, thank you for joining me because today's case is absolutely wild. I originally saw it on that show Snapped, and it was just so shocking. I was like, oh my God, I have to do a video on this. It is basically like a real life Weekend at Bernie's. I've never seen that movie. I don't know anyone who has, but we all know the concept. And if you don't worry about it because you'll definitely know what I'm talking about by the end of this video. So let's get into the case of Brian Geddes and Jordan Shaver. So this story takes place in Garden City, Idaho, which is a suburb of Boise, and it is a pretty average income area, maybe on like the lower end since it's a little bit more rural. And outside Garden City lived Jordan Shaver, who was in an even lower income area called Nampa. Jordan Shaver lived in a trailer with her single mom, and she was a really nice girl, but she was definitely more of a have-not, and that kind of carried a social stigma. She became a little bit isolated because her peers kind of saw her as trailer trash. However, things were looking up for Jordan when she ran into Brian Geddes on these hiking trails that went through the neighborhoods of Garden City. She was out walking her dog, and this older man was out hiking. They ran into each other, they started talking, and he gave her his address in case she ever wanted to swing by. She did exactly that. Just a few days later, she pounded on his door in the rain, and she was covered in blood, and she told him that she had gotten in a fight with her boyfriend. Now, a little about Brian. He was a 49-year-old single man, and he was also an entrepreneur. He was very self-made, very like classic American dream. He had actually gotten his money because with a $600 unemployment check in the 80s, he went out and bought a used car, and then he fixed up that car and then sold it at a higher price. And he just kept doing this with more and more cars, and he opened his own car dealership. So this was actually a multi-million-dollar company. So Brian was doing very well for himself. But very often when your professional life is doing well, your personal life is doing the opposite. So his marriage unfortunately fell apart, and he remained in contact with his two children, which were named Megan and Brennan, I believe. Megan is in this story more than Brennan is. But he is a single man in his late 40s, and he's just trying to live his best life. And one of the steps in doing this was getting a nice home on Elaynea Lane in Garden City. And Brian was very wealthy, but he liked to be humble about his wealth. So he didn't own a mansion, he didn't own designer clothes. So he just had his house, and then he did like to splurge on cars since that was his passion. So he owned a BMW, a Porsche, and a Hummer. He also owned a boat that he loved to take out on the weekends. And since Brian's kids were grown, he kind of had like those fathering tendencies still, and that is what drew him to 21-year-old Jordan. So after she shows up to his house, he's like, yes, you can stay with me. And they begin living together as roommates. So one day, his daughter Megan goes by the house, and she sees Brian and Jordan smoking cigarettes on the porch. And she's like, oh, is this your new girlfriend? And he's like, no, it's not like that. She's just gonna be staying with me for a few weeks while she gets back on her feet. And she tells her dad to watch out. She's like, I mean, you're a wealthy guy. She's a young, beautiful girl. So a lot of the times one person ends up taking advantage of the other, and he's like, no, like, don't worry about it. I can look out for myself. And she's like, okay. And Jordan kind of blossoms after meeting Brian. She feels a lot more confident in herself because she finally has like that financial stability she'd never had in her entire life. And she feels so confident that she goes onto Facebook and looks up her childhood crush, Burke. And she goes to his page and she does that thing where you like a bunch of their photos. So then they get the notifications and you catch their eye. And he's like, wow, Jordan has really grown into a beautiful woman. And this causes him to DM her. So a classic social media love story. Jordan and Burke go on their first date to the mall, and this was a month or so before Halloween. So they actually spend their first date trying on Halloween costumes at the Party City, which actually sounds like a really fun first date. And they are just getting along so well. Their personalities mesh perfectly, and Burke is really, really impressed with how Jordan has changed since high school. Because remember, they're 21 and Burke is in college. He is eating ramen noodles every night. He's just trying to get good grades in his classes. And meanwhile, Jordan tells him that she was able to secure a job being a loan officer at the local bank. So she is having this full-time job, salary, benefits, PTO, and she's even in the process of buying her first house. And he wants to see this house that she keeps talking about because the most of the time they're hanging out at Burke's place. She always has an excuse why they can't go over there. And Burke pushes harder to see Jordan's house. And she tells him that her mom is actually there recovering from chemo and she doesn't want to see anyone in this weakened state. So therefore, nobody can come over at the time. And Burke doesn't want to push the uncomfortable issue, you know, like he kind of feels bad asking in the first place. So he decides like not to ask again, but he does take Jordan to meet his family. His family all love her, and after that, it seems that he's gained Jordan's trust and she finally invites him to see her house. So Burke drives up to this house and he is just completely blown away. It is a trailer, but it's in very nice shape. It has a gorgeous yard. There's a hot tub in the back, and there's all these really nice cars in the driveway. And he is like, how did you afford all of this? And Jordan is like, yeah, so like I have my job at the bank, but also my dad, who abandoned me when I was a little girl, is now back in my life and he's just trying to make up for all those lost years by buying me gifts. So soon, Burke and all of their friends start going over to Jordan's place. There's a 72-inch TV, there's the hot tub, and there's always booze, weed, and great music. So it very quickly becomes the hangout, kind of like the basement in that 70s show. They're always over there, and if you show up, you know that other people are going to be there. So it just kind of becomes like the spot. Burke eventually moves in, actually, and other people are always there. They kind of feel like they live there. And Jordan is super generous, super casual, like they can just open up her fridge and take out any food that they want. Jordan tells them that she was able to buy the house fully furnished with all of the cars, the hot tub, and the boat because the man who was selling it had to move to Europe to take care of his elderly and infirm parents. With her dad helping her out with the original purchase and the fact that this house was just a steal and came with all these extra items, Jordan was able to secure this completely bomb setup. So the changing story of how she got the house is kind of shady. And Burke also notices that despite working in finance, Jordan never seems to go to work. Like she's there during the day, but she's also there on weekends. And she also parties with them at night. And he's like, when do you go and do the work? Like you're spending the money, but you don't really seem to be earning it. Burke also pulls up one day, driving one of Jordan's cars, and sees the neighbors unloading their groceries. And so he decides to run over and say hi. He walks over to introduce himself, and he also wants to ask if their music is too loud, because they're over there drinking in the hot tub like every single night. And these neighbors are like in their 70s or 80s, so he's worried about them being bothered by all of this. So he walks up to the elderly couple and they are extremely cold to him. And they ask how the young lady got the house. And Burke tells them about the sick parents in Europe and the bulk purchase. And the older lady is just kind of like So yeah, that's what she told you. And they're just like not really having it with Burke. And I don't know why neither party presses the issue further, but this is how the interaction ends. And he goes into the house and tells Jordan about the hostile exchange he just had with their neighbors. And she's like, oh my God, I know. Like, they must have Alzheimer's because I've introduced myself to them like 4 or 5 times. And every time they act like it's the first time meeting me. Like, don't worry about them. And Burke, just is like, okay. So Brian, the 49-year-old, remember him? His birthday comes by and his daughter Megan is busy that day, so she doesn't text or call him. But she does try to get in contact with him the next day, and she calls him and he doesn't answer. But then he texts her and he's like, yeah, like I'm spending my 50th birthday in Jackpot at the casinos. And Jackpot is a city in Nevada with a bunch of casinos and gambling, and it's a 3-hour drive from Garden City. It's unlike Brian to gamble his hard-earned money, but it's also his 50th birthday. That's like a huge milestone. So Megan is kind of like, okay, like, I guess, but she keeps trying to call Brian because they haven't spoken in like 2 weeks. It's just been texting. And typically, like, they would talk on the phone, she would go over for dinners. They had a pretty good relationship. And she also notices that he doesn't really want to talk to her on the phone. Like, he's always like, oh, I'm stepping into a casino, it's too loud, or oh, I have bad reception, or like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that you called. And another thing that she notices is that the texts are not in Brian's typical tone. Different people have different texting styles. And she notices that these texts that she's getting have like words spelled wrong, there's lots of exclamation points, and this wasn't the way that her dad would normally text. So Megan starts to get pretty suspicious. Back at the party house, these friends are having an amazing time. They're all young college students. They don't notice any of the red flags that are surrounding this situation. A college student probably hasn't had a full-time job. They probably haven't bought a house. They don't understand everything that goes into this because, like, if you have a full-time job, a lot of the time you're gonna get home really late and you're also gonna be so tired that you like don't wanna like drink beer until 2 a.m. and like go to work the next day. So they don't notice that Jordan's behavior is off in any way because these kids are all like 20, 21 years old. And also, Jordan keeps plying them with alcohol and drugs so that they don't ask any questions. The smoke is in their eyes, quite literally, because of the weed. And Jordan, like I said, is an amazing host. She even lets them hang out there when she's not there. So like if she's out shopping or something, they can still like hang out in the living room and watch TV. And one day, the friends are doing exactly that. They're watching TV, chilling on the couch, and a man just walks in through the front door. Like this older guy. They're like, oh my God, who are you? And this man is like, what are you guys doing in my dad's house? Jordan happens to arrive just a few minutes after this man, and she gets out of her car and she tells the man about how Brian is taking care of his sick parents. And Jordan is pretty shaken from this experience. It was weird that like he walked in through the like unlocked front door, like that's terrifying. But what Jordan seems to be scared about is if he goes to the authorities. So Brian's son runs back and tells his sister Megan what happened when he walked into the house and how random people seem to be living in their dad's house as if it's theirs. And Megan is like, okay, like I'm gonna get to the bottom of this. So the house looks absolutely trashed. Like there's food sitting out on plates that's been there for days. There's empty beer cans all over the yard, and Brian was very clean. So when his daughter Megan comes by the house next, this is the first sign that something is amiss. So she walks up to the front door and she knocks on the door, and Jordan answers. And Jordan goes, "Who the fuck are you?" And the daughter is like, yeah, I'm Megan. I'm Brian's daughter. I've literally met you before. And she says that Jordan's face just goes white. and she literally runs past Megan, gets in the car, and drives off. So Megan calls the police and she tells them everything weird that has gone on in the past 2.5 weeks. She's like, I haven't talked to my dad since like October 16th. Like his 50th birthday came and went, and like he's not wanting to call any of us. He's supposedly out of town. And then I show up to his house and it's being inhabited by all of these like teenagers. So like, what the hell? First things first, in any sort of investigation, the police begin tracking Brian's phone. And luckily, they see that it's moving around in the Garden City area. So they're like, okay, cool, maybe he's closer than we all thought. The police track it to a Walmart where they sit and wait in the parking lot, hoping to see Brian walk out. But Brian doesn't walk out. Instead, Jordan is the one exiting the Walmart. Jordan is walking around with a missing person's phone. So at this point, the police follow her to her car and she pretends not to see them. Like she just looks at them and is like, and like keeps walking to her car, and she gets in and locks the doors and is like looking in like the floorboard, like in the middle area. And then the cops have to like walk up and like knock on the window and they're like, hello? And Jordan's like, oh, hi, what's up? So the officer that Jordan talks to when she's at the police station is actually one that she's already familiar with. So Jordan had some shoplifting charges from a few years back, and she never showed up in court for those. So there was actually a warrant out for her arrest. So the police are able to like keep her at the station. She tells them about how Brian is taking care of his sick parents in Europe and how he asked her to look after the house. But she's not really looking after the house. It's absolutely trashed. And they're like, we know that's not true. So she comes up with story number 2. And in this story, she tells them about how she was staying with Brian because she had recently gotten out of a violent relationship. And she was wondering also how he got all of this money because he had all these nice cars, he had this beautiful house, a hot tub, and he eventually tells her that he got this money because he was dealing drugs. And she agrees to go with him to one of the drug deals, and it's in that same Walmart parking lot that they had picked her up at. This drug deal went bad, and this is the last day that she ever sees Brian. Like, she's also been looking for him this whole time. And a few days after that, one of the dealers shows up at the door and threatens her not to tell anybody. So she's too scared to go to the police, and she just kind of like continues living her life. But the police know that this has to be a lie, because if a scary drug dealer knew where you lived and had threatened you at that location before, then why would you continue staying there? So the police bring Burke into the station as well. They think that maybe he was her accomplice. So Burke goes into the station and he realizes that he has no idea what Jordan has been up to. The police pull out a photo of Brian Geddes, and Burke looks at the photo and realizes that he is wearing the exact same jacket. This was a jacket that Jordan had given him as a gift. So Brian just gets this really disgusting, uncomfortable feeling. And he's like, yeah, like I'll go and talk to Jordan for you guys. So he walks into the same interrogation room as Jordan, and he's like, Jordan, please tell the truth. They're trying to implicate me. I don't know what's going on. So the officer walks back into the room, and Jordan takes his hand and is like, okay, I'll tell you what happened. And the officer's like, all right, we're getting somewhere. Her demeanor has completely changed. I can tell we've broken her down a little bit. She's ready to give us another story. Jordan tells them the third and final story of what happened to 49-year-old Brian Geddes. She says that she was giving Brian a massage on the bed. So I guess they were sexual, even though he said that they weren't. So Brian is, laying down, and Jordan is crouched over him, giving him this massage. And she mentions that she got a handgun to protect herself from her violent ex-boyfriend. And there's a problem with the gun. Like, it's not firing, it's jammed or something. Brian's like, oh, like I can take a look at it for you. And she runs over and grabs it from her purse and she hands it to Brian. and he like tinkers with it a little bit, and he's like, okay, I think I fixed it. And Brian hands it like back at her, and she like takes it, but when Jordan grabs it, the gun fires and it shoots Brian in the back of the head. She is shocked. It all happened so fast. And she wants to call 911, but she just cannot bring herself to do it. So she goes on like a stress shopping trip, and she stress buys some lingerie, makeup, and a tarp from their local Walmart. And she's seen on security camera footage on October 16th, 2012, doing exactly this. So she comes back and she rolls up Brian's body in the bloody comforter, and then she puts that onto the tarp and drags it outside. And remember, this is technically a trailer, so there's like metal panels around the bottom that can be easily removed in case you want to like take the trailer somewhere. And she removes one of these panels and drags his body and stuffs it into the crawl space and moves the panel back so that nothing looks out of the ordinary. To follow up on Jordan's story, the police go to the house and they find Brian's badly decomposed body in the crawl space. It's so badly decomposed that the coroner has to check dental records to get a positive identification. And he estimates that the body had been in that crawl space, in the dirt, in the damp, dark crawl space for at least 2 weeks. Coroner determines that Brian Geddes had been shot in the back of the head the day before his 50th birthday, October 16th, 2012. The police also search the house and they pull back the sheets on the mattress and they see a huge blood stain. So Jordan and Burke had been sleeping on this bloodstained mattress the entire time. Cops arrest Jordan Shaver for the first-degree murder of Brian Geddes, but she later pleads guilty to second-degree murder. First-degree murder in the state of Idaho carries a potential death penalty, and to avoid that, she takes a plea deal for second-degree murder. On April 7th, 2014, Jordan Shaver is sentenced to life in prison. She'll be eligible for parole in 2032 when she's in her 40s. At her sentencing, Jordan gave a very emotional statement of regret to Brian's family, saying that she's disgusted with the way that she acted, but Brian's kids say that they'll probably never forgive her. Their dad was only 50, so not only did Jordan cut his life short, but she is now going to spend the rest of her youth in prison, if not longer. She killed somebody and shoved him in the crawl space of his own house and then just kept living there. She's just living it up with Brian's cash and credit cards, eating the food in his fridge, sleeping on his mattress that she killed him on, and she's able to fool all of her friends at the same time. Like, Jesus Christ, I feel so bad for Burke. Imagine the trust issues you would have going into your next relationship after dating somebody who you found out was a murderer and you were sleeping on the bed that they were murdered on. Yeah, these kids were drinking beer in a hot tub over a dead body and not even knowing it. Like I said, this story kind of reminded me of a much darker Weekend at Bernie's, where they're just having a party at a dead guy's house, just completely unbothered by all of it. And of course, little did these people know that the homeowner of the house that they were drinking in, that they were smoking in, was just a few feet away, rotting in the crawl space. The police do know that this was premeditated on Jordan's part because Burke had been hearing about this house for several weeks before the murder, and it wasn't until after the murder that Jordan finally invited him over. So she'd been thinking of this for a while. And I mean, I guess she just wanted to be accepted by her peers so badly that she'd do anything. I do feel bad for Jordan to an extent because she just wanted to be accepted. She just wanted to be somebody that people admired. But geez, like to kill somebody and to sleep on the bloody mattress and to give the deceased person's clothes to your new boyfriend? Like, I don't know, like something must be off with this girl's mind, because that is wild. Jordan has written several letters to Burke from inside her jail cell, but Burke has never responded. So yeah, that's the case of Jordan Shaver and Brian Geddes. As always, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. You've made it this far. You clearly were interested by the story I was telling. So please subscribe to my channel to support me. It only takes a second and it's free and it really helps me out. So until next video, I hope you guys all have a wonderful day and stay safe.